Acts chapter 16, and we're ready now for verse 6. Paul and his companions traveled through the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been kept by the Holy Spirit from preaching the word in the province of Asia. This is an interesting thing. I mean, you've got the geography there, but to me, what's most interesting is that last phrase, having been kept by the Holy Spirit from preaching the word in the province of Asia. We don't even know how the Holy Spirit kept them from, but it's safe to say that they were convinced that it was the Holy Spirit who put the brakes on and wouldn't let them go. A couple of things about that, in my opinion. First of all, this gives us a hint into Paul's general way he did things, procedures. He was constantly seeking the leadership, the guidance, the help of the Holy Spirit. I believe that he wanted to go at the bidding of, under the leadership of the Holy Spirit wherever he went. Okay, so this is by implication, but I believe that somehow God, both somehow and for some reason, God kept him from going into Asia. There's many reasons why this could be. I think the most feasible is a possibility of two things. One, it was unsafe. It would have harmed the mission. And two, these people weren't ready. I don't know. We don't get the reason why. Luke didn't. Evidently, if he knew, the Holy Spirit had prompted him to include the why. We just know the what. Verse 7, when they came to the border of Mysia, they tried to enter Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus would not allow them to. Here we have God's Spirit, the Spirit of Jesus, the Holy Spirit, directly guiding or withholding the comings and goings of Paul and his companions. Okay, verse 8. So, instead of stewing about it, instead of complaining about it, instead of, well, what did they do? Okay, verse 8. So they passed by Mysia and went down to Troas. During the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia standing and begging him, come over to Macedonia and help us. Macedonia. You can go there today. And I'm told along the coast, it's exceedingly beautiful. Macedonia was very Grecian in culture. And this vision from Paul, this dream that Paul got, I'll put it that way, was mainly a way for God to push them forward in the mission. Maybe is it possible that the reason they didn't go, that the Holy Spirit and the Spirit of Jesus wouldn't let them go to Mysia, wouldn't let them go into Asia, is because Macedonia was the next destination that he had in mind. There was a man of Macedonia standing and begging him. Now, okay, remember in the very first Star Wars movie, right? R2-D2, he has this like plasma projection thing of a Princess Leia saying, "You're our only hope," right? I don't think that was quite what this was about, but it was plain to Paul, this is our next destination. Verse 10, after Paul had seen the vision, we got ready at once to leave for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel there to them. Two quick things. Quick? Do I ever do anything? No, not really. Okay. We got ready. Now, in the book of Acts, there are passages that are called the we passages. When Luke writes, we got ready at once to leave for Macedonia, what he's saying is he was part of the entourage. He was part of the traveling group. So this is firsthand accounting from Luke's experience. We got ready to leave for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. Well, way to go, boys. Way to go. You figured it out. When you get this vision, come over to Macedonia and help us. Maybe we should go to Macedonia next. Okay. Sorry, I mean, that was probably unfair to Paul and Luke and Silas and whomever else was with them. Verse 11, from Troas, we put out to sea and sailed straight for Samothrace. And the next day we went to Neapolis. From there we traveled to Philippi, a Roman colony, and the leading city of that district of Macedonia. Why would Luke give this travelogue of where they stopped along the way? I think it's so that what he has written could be verified by people, especially people in that day, in that part of the world. They would have known exactly what Luke was talking about, writing about. Well, it took them, they headed for Samothrace, then Neapolis, and then Philippi. That should be ringing a bell, shouldn't it? A Roman colony and the leading city of that district of Macedonia. They were in Macedonia now. And in a Roman colony. Now, a Roman colony, you didn't just, get to have that painted on the Welcome to Philippi sign, a Roman colony. It wasn't just because you were mainly Roman. It was because you had been designated as a Roman colony by Rome itself. They would have had a reasonable and notable presence of the Roman legion there. The rules of Roman commerce and exchange would have been in effect. Really, one of the reasons that Philippi was a city of a leading city in the district is because they had prospered under the Roman construct here. Okay. All right, moving on. Last part of verse 12. And we stayed there several days. And the indication is went to Samothrace and then straight on to Neapolis and then straight on to Philippi, as though there was no extended stay in any of those other two stop-offs. Now in Philippi, they stayed there several days. Verse 13, on the Sabbath, Saturday, we went outside the city gate to the river where we expected to find a place of prayer. Now there's a hint to something that I think is important here. First of all, apparently that people went to the river to pray. There was nothing theological or spiritually significant about the river other than was a decent and good place to go, and probably would have been a quiet place. Okay. Second implication here is there evidently was no synagogue for Paul, Silas, Timothy, and whomever else, Luke, and whomever else was with them to go, because that was their normal practice. On the Sabbath, they went to the synagogue, and previously we saw they were invited to speak. If they didn't go to the synagogue, one of the probable conclusions would be there was no synagogue. Now that tells me there were not that many Jews in Philippi for whatever reason, because in order to have a synagogue, you had to have 12 Jewish men and the means to construct the building for the synagogue. Evidently, didn't have that. So they went to the river where we expected to find a place of prayer. We sat down and began to speak to the women who had gathered there. No men, just women. Well, the big significance there, these women, well, they became the backbone. Verse 14. One of those listening was a woman from the city of Thyatira named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth. Now a dealer in purple cloth, that was not just a cloth dealer, because purple cloth was coveted because it was expensive to produce. And further, the people who, first of all, could afford to buy purple cloth, and then people who had the right to wear purple cloth were in the upper echelon of that society. They were the rulers. They were the wealthy. So her clientele would not have been just Joe off the street or Jolene off the street. Okay. She was a worshiper of God. Was she a Jew? Well, always before, if a person was a Jew, Luke designated it. He doesn't designate that here. She was a worshiper of God. Is there a possibility that somehow, I think it would have been under the influence of some Jewish thought, she discovered God and discovered he is this thing, this being I long for, and so she began to worship God. The Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. Way big deal. God opens hearts. You don't. I don't. Now, I can do things that will close people's hearts, and I can present myself and the truth in a way that makes it less difficult, perhaps, for people to open their hearts. But the opening of hearts is God's business. So, do we just wait around until somebody looks like their heart is open because that's what God has done? Or do we ask God to open people's hearts? I choose the latter. I think that is consistent with how Paul, Silas, Luke, Timothy, I think that's consistent with how God advanced the word, his will, his ways, the gospel among his people. And so, wouldn't it make sense that would probably be a good way for us to do it? I think it is. So I don't want to get too deeply into your business, but I'm going to ask a question. Is there anybody you're praying that God will open their heart? You can do this generally, and you can do this specifically. And I think the point is, do it. I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.